Hi, future CRNA. Jenny Fennell here. I have some exciting news to share with you guys that CRNA School Prep Academy is having its very first in-person conference this fall, October 23rd and 24th in Greenville, South Carolina. We are so excited to meet you. Richard and I can't wait to give you a high five, fist bump, belly bump, whatever you like. And I just want to go over with you guys some of the things you would walk away with if you were to attend. And I also want to let you guys know that it doesn't matter if you're a nursing student or whether you're in the application phase, or even if you're a newly accepted student, you're going to walk away from this conference with something. So I want to let you know that anyone's welcome to attend. We do give special discounts to CRNA School Prep Academy students. So if you're interested in becoming a CRNA School Prep Academy student, you can go ahead and join today and actually get a discount on attending this conference with us. But some of the takeaways that you will get from this conference is you're going to get to network with current nurses and nurse anesthesia students, program staff, and fellow future CRNAs. You're also going to gain a thorough understanding of anesthesia pharmacology. You're going to get actionable methods for managing stress through school. You're going to learn study tips that will allow you to accomplish your academic goals. You're going to create an accountability partnership with someone you meet. Learn more about a program, get insight from a program director's perspective. You're going to get a financial plan for paying for school and paying off your debt. You're going to get a chance to ask current nurse anesthesia students what it's like to be in school. You're going to demystify the application process and stand out as an applicant. You're also going to get a growth mindset lecture that will keep you grounded and empowered to push through the challenges you'll face as an applicant and a student. You're also going to get insight and behind the scenes of a mock interview session. And essentially, you're going to leave with more clarity in your plan and confidence in your preparation. So we really hope to see you there. And if you want more information, in the show notes below, you're going to see the link for events, crnaschoolprepacademy.com. And we look forward to meeting you. All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy and excited to share this special guest with you today. This is another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. And today we have a financial consultant, Natalie Kratzer. Welcome. I'm so excited and happy to have you here. And I want to start off the show by just giving a quick disclaimer for everyone that the concepts presented are intended for educational purposes. This information should not be considered as an investment advice or recommendation of any particular security, strategy, or product. For a full disclaimer, please see the show notes. Natalie, we have been friends now for a couple years. You have worked with so many of my students and you are just so inspirational. I would love for you to give the audience more of a background as far as how you started working with CRNAs and SRNAs.
Absolutely, Jenny. It is hard to believe this much time has passed already. It's pretty amazing. And the sentiment is absolutely mutual, by the way. I love working with you and absolutely adore working with all of your students at all the different phases that they're at in their CRNA journey. So the way that I got into specifically working with SRNAs, nurses, CRNAs, my sister-in-law actually graduated from the program, her CRNA program, a little over 8 years ago, and she's been working as a CRNA since. When she was going through school, it was tough because I really admittedly didn't know what a CRNA was before that point, right? And I certainly didn't know what it meant for her and for my brother to be going through that experience and all the challenges and potential obstacles and everything else that you hit during that time. And so that inspired me and Michelle, my sister-in-law as well, really to be able to do this, to speak with students and make sure that they are able to be more proactive than what we were able to be during her journey. You know, neither of us knew what was coming down the line. And so it was very reactive and we certainly got through it. I mean, I didn't have to do all the hard work she did. I just had to be there to guide her financially. But now I have such a different understanding of what all you guys go through during this time. And especially now as I've worked with more and more and more nurses and SRNAs and CRNAs all around the country, literally, you know, we have a huge perspective of all that can come at you guys, no matter what your family situation.
Yeah, it's excellent. So yeah, you guys, this journey financially is a huge burden on everyone, and everyone's journey financially is different. And so I really love how Natalie said being proactive is really the key to lessening your burden during school. It's not going to alleviate everything. There's no such thing. If we had a magic click your fingers, here's the money, just don't worry about it. Everyone would take it. But it's really about planning. And this is something that I myself struggled with. When I graduated, gosh, what was that now? Almost 7 years ago. We hit the ground running. I made mistakes. Did I survive? Yes, but could we have done it better and probably with more on the outside? Yeah, we could have probably done better. And who knows, I could have had my debt paid off by now if I had planned better. We're here to help you. And the advice Natalie can share is just so invaluable, and it needs to be shared. So I'm so excited about this episode. We're going to go ahead and jump right in to some of the questions. All right. So it's kind of one of the first questions I have for you, and that I get from a lot of my students, is people are afraid. Are they not going to be able to get enough loans to cover tuition and living expenses?
Right. Yeah, I get this one quite often. And really, the first thing I'll say is that your undergrad loan process is not the same experience that you will have with your grad loan process. Yes, you're filling out the FAFSA, but it is a completely different, what they're looking for is very, very different. And so the bottom line is that money may be available via federal loans as long as you can justify the expenses. Now, there's other alternatives to federal loans as well, but in terms of the federal loans, as long as you can go through an exercise with regard to your living expenses in particular and kind of outline, all right, what do I expect this to look like during school? For some of you, that's very difficult because you're going to be moving. You may have rent. Sometimes I've got some students who are actually moving back in with mom and dad to try and save expenses. And so either way, there's change, right? And so sometimes it's a little bit difficult to understand what is that going to actually look like in a year, 2 years, couple months, whatever it is that your planning timeline looks like. And so you do the best that you can to outline that, to get it down on paper so that you can then turn around and share that with your financial aid department or office at your school. That way they can review it, and we refer to that as special circumstances, because all of you are special cases. In all seriousness, because they recognize, the department knows, your school knows that you are more than likely going to be going to school without any earned income during that time for most of the programs, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're going to look over all of that, and they'll be able to say, yes, this is justifiable expenses, and they will approve you or not. And if they don't, they'll talk to you about that, and they'll try and seek to understand your situation. And then the school or the financial aid department at your program will be the one to send your award letter then, as we call it.
Okay, very good to know. And yes, I have heard students tell me about how there's like a acceptance process and how you can appeal it. And if they come back at you and say, no, this doesn't qualify, you can actually then appeal it again. And so it can be a process, but like you said, starting off with writing things down, creating a budget is really where it starts, which is not easy. And I know I'm guilty. I don't balance a checkbook. I don't know how I've made it this far in my life without doing that, but my mom's not going to be proud of that one.
That's so funny. You're not alone though, especially those of us who barely even write checks. It's a different world than it used to be. Yeah, it's just different. So there's no right or wrong, Jenny.
That's good. I do think an app that people, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called Mint.
Mm-hmm.
It can.
Yes. There's a handful of different apps out there that can help you. They're actually more of a, I want to say this, it's a true understanding of what your spending was, rather than saying, I want my spending to be, which is a budget, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a handful of those that are out there, and they're certainly worth looking into, especially if you just, most of you have never had to, as nurses, really pay attention to your spending. And that might be a little oversimplified statement that I just said, but when you have money coming in and you don't have this sort of exaggerated situation that you're about to enter into with school, it's very easy to just, if I have the money, I spend it. And so those kind of tools, those apps can help with that, to get an understanding of where you're actually spending your money.
Correct. At least knowing where you're currently are. And like you said, you still have to make a plan for where you want to go, which is different.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but yeah, knowing what you currently are facing as far as your habits is really important. And having a steady check come in every 2 weeks is very different than waiting once every, every semester for a distribution of money. So,
Absolutely.
all right. Well, very good. Very good insight. Another question I get a lot is I'm single. I don't have any additional income. How can I get a loan without a cosigner?
Yes. So for the federal loans, thankfully, you do not have to worry about that. Cosigners are not necessary for the federal lending options that are out there. Now, if you are going to try and explore some of the alternatives, such as a private loan, so private loan basically just meaning it's not through the federal government directly, it's going to be through a bank or a lending institution. Those will almost definitely need a cosigner because you will no longer have income. So those are typically going to be looking at income and also credit scores as well.
Yes. Yes.
And
And
another note, I almost forgot, Jenny,
oh yeah.
just a side note, sometimes students will assume that that has to be a parent that cosigns.
Mm.
It does not necessarily. It could be a spouse if you are married, could also be a loved one, a grandma, an aunt, an uncle, somebody who you have a very strong relationship who is looking at you as trustworthy that you will indeed repay those loans. Because that's really all a cosigner is. It's the
Mhm.
person who's going to be on the hook for your loan if you default.
Correct. And I've also remember you mentioned before there are loans out there that fall off, like the cosigner can fall off in 5 years.
That's correct. So there's a lot of different timelines. Some are more like the 5 year. I've seen some that are 24 months.
Mm.
So just, if you're looking at private loans, there's a lot of things to make sure you're looking at because it's just a little more, basically those institutions can, this may be a little bit too exaggerated as well, but they can kind of do whatever they want.
Yes.
So they can create different lending terms, whereas the federal government is very black and white. You know what you got.
Yes, I agree. And I even know because I went that avenue. I went to private loans and because I was getting better interest rates with private
Right.
loans. But that being said, you had to be really careful because some of them don't allow you to forbear private loans. So when you're in school, that's a big deal. So you have to really make sure you know what you're getting when you're getting to the private loan sector.
It's a super big deal, and especially right now with all of the CARES Act, all of
Mhm.
this stuff going on with response to COVID. Any federal loans right now are actually placed in an administrative forbearance. So people have 0% interest right now until September 30th of 2021. And if you have a private loan, you did not get that relief.
Right. That's
Something to consider.
amazing that has been going on. I mean, what an amazing thing that's giving back to these students.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that answers that question for you guys. The next question I have for you are, I guess, what are the best loans for graduate students? And I should say the lowest interest rate loans.
Right. Yeah. Because it's like a constantly changing landscape, right?
Mhm.
Especially these days, again, with all of this kind of oddity going on in our world. So federal interest rates reset every July. So it's that's kind of nice as well. You have that black and white, you know exactly what your rate is going to be going into those. And then each summer, you'll know a little bit in advance what are the new rates going into that next academic year. So for 2021, there's basically two types of federal loans for grad students. So federal direct unsubsidized, those rates right now for a few months yet are 4.3%. And the grad plus or graduate plus loans are 5.3%. And so those aren't too bad, right? Now, there's also these origination fees on federal loans. And sometimes that's where people really feel like they want to explore other options because it's an additional charge that gets added to the overall amount of loan that you actually take. So the origination fee on the federal direct is 1.06%. And then on the grad plus loans, that origination fee is 4.25%. That's pretty hefty over and above what you're actually taking. So that's where you do need to pay attention to the interest rates and the options that you have. But really, to go back to the original question you asked, which one's the best? I always hate giving this answer as a planner, but it depends. Everybody's situation is so very different, and the options that are going to be available to them and at their fingertips are going to be very different as well. So I think it's fair to always consider the federal loans. And then if you do have a cosigner available and you're able to qualify for an interest rate that's a little bit less, it can absolutely be fair to take a look at those options as well. Just like we talked about earlier, make sure you understand all of the details of what the loans are on the table for you. And then another alternative, if you have equity in a home, or if a parent or loved one has equity in a home and they're willing to work with you, that can be another way to actually borrow money. So now you're almost borrowing money from yourself, right?
Mhm.
And again, interest rates are going to vary very much so within home equity lines of credit. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the ins and outs and the goods and bads and doing a real comparison of all the things that are on the table for you.
Okay, very good. I guess what I gathered from that is that there's no straightforward answer and that they're all might have some hidden details. Like I never knew about this surplus fee, and that really tacks on a lot of interest from 5.3 and additional 4.25. I know when I was in school, graduate loans were more like 7% interest,
They
some even
were.
8. They were really
Mhm.
high. That's why I was freaking out thinking I have to find something else to do because my private loans, I was getting 4% or less because of good credit. So again,
Absolutely.
but like you said, you really have to look at all the details before you make a decision. So
Yeah.
great information. So next question is, can I place my previous loans on forbearance during school? And is this a good idea?
That is a great question. So, getting technical, more than likely what you would be looking at is not necessarily a forbearance, but rather what they call a deferment. And deferment for undergrad federal loans is typically quite possible. You do want to reach out to what we call your loan servicer to make sure you understand if it is 100% indeed available to you. So your loan servicer, that's going to be those names at the top of your student loan statements like Navient, Great Lakes, et cetera, et cetera. So you will want to reach out and make sure that your loan type is eligible and that your loan servicer says yes. And then you also want to make sure you understand what are the steps to actually do that. In some cases, your school will report it to the federal lending agencies, and it happens sort of like automatically, but you don't want to make that assumption. Reach out to the servicer. Sometimes it's based on your academic year. There's a program I work very closely with here in Pennsylvania. Their first semester is the summer semester. They start in May. That does not get reported because of how their academic year is set up. So if you aren't contacting your servicer, it will assume that you're going to be continuing to pay through that first semester, and then they catch up with you the fall semester. So either way, call, don't wait, be proactive. There's that theme again, right? And then the other piece is if you have private loans. It's very up in the air with the private loans. It's not, again, that black and white thing. We don't quite have that with the private. So you want to call them as well and make sure you understand what are the options. Is that something you can do? And then whether or not it's a good idea was kind of the second part of that question. In most cases, you're going to have such limited or no income, right? And so if we can get those bills off the table, most often that's going to be the best decision to get those into deferment while you're in school.
Yes. And this is honestly such a hard choice, something I went through that I actually remember crying about when I saw what I had done to my student loans. Because I went into grad school with $80,000 of student loan debt, and they were private, government, combination of both. And like you said, I did have to be proactive and submit my transcripts every single semester. So they knew I was still a full-time status, especially for my private loans. And there
Right.
was an issue I had once where I dropped my class hours, but had a lot of clinical hours. And so they tried to say I didn't qualify for forbearance because of my less than part-time status. I had to get a letter from it was stressful. I had to get a letter from my actual program director to the loan company. It was just ended up being okay, but it was definitely stressful to deal with during the time. And then one thing too, but you do what you have to do. And so
Right.
what I ended up doing was my 6 months before graduation, I came out of deferment and started paying on them again. Once I kind of knew there was an end in sight, I had a job lined up. I knew we could afford it. I didn't feel comfortable doing that prior to that. But at that point, I had taken out so much extra loans as a buffer that I was like, okay, I need to start paying on these loans again. And that's when I had seen that I owed over 110% of the loans I had been paying on for 3 years prior to school starting. So the interest rates do accumulate. But again, if you don't have a choice, it's the only choice you have.
Yes, and just to I know I always get into the weeds on these things, but just to be clear, Jenny, some students will have what they call subsidized undergraduate
Mm,
loans. The subsidized loans, thankfully, that interest will not accrue. Unfortunately, quite often I see in most nursing students that portion of their undergrad loans is on the smaller side. But
yeah.
hey, every little bit helps, right?
Right. Heck
But
yeah.
you're right on the any other type of loan that's not called a subsidized, that interest is going to accrue. Sometimes I'll have students who have done just an absolutely amazing job of saving in advance. And so they'll pay their interest. They won't pay the
Mm,
full payment, but they'll pay the interest so that they don't see like what
that's
you
smart.
did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that can be helpful, but it's just not realistic for everybody. Like you said, you
Right.
do what you have to do.
Right. Right. Very good to know. So next question, should I dip into my RN 401k or 403b and borrow against it to help pay for school?
This is such a common question. And, again, with so much of this, everybody's situation is going to be different. But the things that I think I see quite often, people don't really think through the whole way. I'm going to try and call those out for us. So there could be more or less two different ways to go about accessing that money. So one would be to take what we would refer to in the financial world as a distribution. So meaning I'm just going to dip in, as you said, right, and pull that money out and put it in my pocket. Okay. Now, if you do that, the first thing I'm going to call out is what's called an opportunity cost. Okay. So, opportunity cost basically is the potential that you could have earned on that money while it was invested. Okay. So, last year, if you didn't pay attention, overall, the markets did exceptionally well from January 1st to December 31st. Yes, there were bumps in the road for sure, but the overall, depending how you were invested, it was a strong year, saying just kind of blanketly in the markets. And so I'm just going to use kind of an average 8%, which last year for a lot of people was much better than that. 8% on that money being earned while it's invested, it basically means if you pulled the money out, you lost 8%. So you have to think about that. And when we're thinking about interest rates, right, at 4%, 5%, 6%, well, that's the cheaper money then, right? So you're kind of doing that side by side comparison. So opportunity cost is the one. The second is that taking money from a 401k when you're under the age of 59 and a half will mean that you're going to be subject to an early withdrawal penalty from the IRS, and that penalty is 10%. Which again, yeah, so now you're adding that to your opportunity cost, right? And you're also going to be paying taxes on the distribution as income. So wherever your income bracket is, you're now also paying taxes on that money if it's a pre-tax account. Okay. Now, some of you do have Roth 401k and 403b options. That's a little bit different in terms of the taxes from an income tax standpoint, but so that's a little bit different animal, but most do have pre-tax. So yeah, you add those three different costs up and it gets pretty ugly pretty fast.
I know I just added up as 48%. Like, what? Oh, I mean, that's if you're in the 20th tax bracket, which does that even, I was being kind of generous on that one while you're in school, but
Yeah. Well, and the year, depending on when your program starts during your first year, you may not have as much income as a full on year, right? But for those of you who are travel nursing in those last few months before starting school, you've got a boatload of income coming in.
yeah.
And so yeah, it's
And
very easy for you to fall into like that 22% tax bracket. That's not unheard of.
right. Especially your first year into school because they go by last
Correct.
year. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Now, the other piece I wanted to mention too, Jenny. So, distribution is one option. Sometimes people will say, well, can I take a loan against it? And that's actually doable while you're working for that employer. Once you've left the employer, it's no longer on the table. And the other part that sometimes catches people way off guard is that if you leave the employer and you still have an outstanding loan within that account, you actually have to pay that loan back before the tax filing deadline of that year. Okay, so if it was
Ooh,
this right now, we took a loan, you would have to pay that back by the time April 15th of 2022 rolled around.
ouch.
Yeah, right. Because now you have no income in that year. So how
Yeah.
the heck are you going to pay back a loan? You've also had the opportunity cost that we just talked about. And you also more than likely put that money in pre-tax,
Mm.
and you're now trying to figure out how to pay it back with post-tax money. All sorts of messiness. And just like you did the math on the other one, it all adds up real fast. So although that money can be very tempting to go dip in many, many cases, it's just not worth it compared to the loan options that are on the table.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm glad we went over that because
Mhm.
I get people asking me that all the time. And I always tell them no, but I'm glad I've now heard the explanation as to why. Like, no, don't do
Gut
it.
said no,
I
right?
know what I can envision what Natalie will say. The answer is no, but I don't know why. Okay, awesome. So I guess next question is, how do students find scholarships or grants or even know if they're going to qualify for financial aid?
So the financial aid piece actually kind of goes back to that FAFSA question. So more or less, as long as you can justify the expenses from an aid standpoint, you're likely going to have at least federal loans on the table for you. From a grant and more of like a scholarship or merit-based standpoint, there are a number of different options out there. You kind of have to do your homework. I'm going to rattle through a few for you. The one thing that's sort of interesting is that for some of these, you do have to actually already be a student in order to be eligible. And so in those cases, you're obviously not going to be able to do that in advance of starting school, but you'll want to keep these on your radar. And some of them are ones you can apply for each year of your program. So for sure, one right out of the gates, AANA Foundation and all of the state-based arms of that, you want to look at those. And that is for sure one where they specifically say scholarships are available to all nurse anesthesia students who are AANA members and currently enrolled in an accredited nurse anesthesia program. So keep that one on your radar. There are some options through the Department of Veterans Affairs, through the what's called the HRSA, which stands for Health Resources and Services Administration. These you can all find on the delightful World Wide Web. The state-specific scholarships as well are certainly worth checking out. So I called out a couple that I'm familiar with here in Pennsylvania. We have one called the Nightingale Awards of PA, and I know there's some different Nightingale type ones in different states. The Nursing Foundations. So be sure to check out your own state or the state where your program's located. Talk to classmates above you in upper cohorts, network through that, do your research. Two sort of different type of options. They're not necessarily scholarships, but things that I know I've seen a ton of students have just phenomenal success with if it's the right fit for you. One is reaching out to military branches. And that every one of the different branches, I believe, has a CRNA program that can come with service requirements depending on what kind of level you're signing up for there. But a lot of those you're going to have, I won't get into all the military jargon, but you will have living stipends and all sorts of different income as well as your program being paid for. But it does come with a promise on the other side. So you want to, again, do your research. And then the final one are actual sign-on bonuses from hospitals. Again, going to come with a promise that you're going to work for that institution for however long. I have seen in my students options, or I shouldn't say options necessarily, but programs where they're getting money on the front end So school's actually getting paid for along the way. And then I've also seen on the back end where they may not get their job offer until closer to the end of the program. And now once they start at the new employer, they'll get money that can then go back to pay for the loans that have accrued. So all sorts of different things out there. Again, talk, network, especially, once you're in clinicals, talk to those hospitals, right? Like know what they're doing and understand what the options are.
Yes, I think that's great advice. And like you said, there's opportunities, but it really takes you digging to find them.
Yes.
There's an opportunity that my hospital is creating for a PACU nurse or a PICU nurse. Sorry, excuse me, PICU. And again, it's because we're trying to kind of recruit a nurse
Right.
who's going to be supported all the way through their anesthesia program and then work for the hospital afterwards. There are several other companies around the country who do things like this. So, looking up various anesthesia companies even and reaching out, I mean, it can't hurt anything, but usually students find out about these things through their clinical rotations,
Yes.
and asking the chief CRNA about these opportunities. But like you said, sign-on bonuses. I had a $33,000 stipend my last year because I signed on with a hospital after I graduated for 4-year work commitment. Um, the one caveat, like you said, do not break the back end of that contract. You will probably owe back what you got paid and interest. So you
That's
really,
right.
yep, you have to make sure you're willing to keep what, if you're taking the money, you have to make sure you're going to give them what they ask for.
Yes.
But
Or
yeah,
at
there,
least understand the consequences, right? Yeah.
correct. I mean, because that's the thing is sometimes life happens and you don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. And,
Mhm.
it's unfortunate when that does happen, but yeah, there's consequences to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, awesome. Well, that's great information. So I guess, a lot of students, and I know some students, this is their only option, but is it possible to live on Medicaid and unemployment during school?
Yeah, good question. So the one piece to be aware of is that unemployment is not going to be on the table because leaving your employer to go to grad school is not what they call a qualifying event to be eligible. So you don't want to count on income from unemployment. Now, Medicaid is a different animal. So all the states' Medicaid programs are a little different. So you do want to reach out to your state's Medicaid office directly to understand whether or not you're going to be eligible within that state, and talk through all the different pieces. Oftentimes you can actually apply online and then follow up with the department directly. Sometimes I will see students who apply and again, you guys are sort of special cases, right? So a lot of times the students are trying to be so proactive. They're actually applying while they still have income as a nurse. And a lot of times the Medicaid office is going to look at that and say, what? You have income. Why would you be eligible? So you just talk to the office, make sure you understand the steps and the timeline. Another little tidbit of advice, I have run into this quite frequently where Medicaid offices will say, hey, you are going to be a special case. And in order to get your eligibility, we're going to need a letter from your employer telling us your last day and a letter from your school saying that, yes, you are going to be a full-time student. So that's not in every case, but at the same time, I've heard it enough that those are two easy steps that you can get out of the way fairly early in order to get as much done proactively as you can.
Yeah, great. And like I said, I've known plenty of students who go on Medicaid and, they even get food stamps, that kind of thing,
Yes.
to
Yeah,
help, which, any little bit helps. So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
so what, or I should say, if I do not have an emergency fund during school, should I take out extra loans so I have extra?
Yeah, this is a toughie because again, you've lived life a certain way while you've been a nurse, right? So you're hopefully used to having that little backup plan, right? Oh my gosh, I need new tires, the furnace died, whatever it is. And so you've got your little emergency savings. This 3 years of life is going to be unlike any 3 years of life. So the key here for me is that if you take money out in advance, it means you're going to be paying interest on that money. So even if you stick it in a savings account or a high yield savings account, and you're getting a little tiny bit of interest on it, because interest is stinky these days, that money costs you money to put into your savings account. And especially if it's federal money, like we just talked about, you also paid an origination fee on top of that money that you just tucked away for a rainy day. And so you want to make sure you're thinking through that. I like for students to be able to have, this is going to maybe sound counterintuitive, but a credit card with no balance on it, right? I don't want you ideally going to school with credit card debt if you can help it, but if you can have a credit card available, that if there's something boom like that you need money for, you can run that credit card for the short term. You can always go back to your financial aid office and say, hey, I miscalculated, or oh my gosh, I had a family emergency, or whatever the situation is. There's always money available to you later. That feels very different than undergrad as well. You can always go back and say, I actually need more than what I initially said I wanted to take. So if you've put it on a credit card, you can always go back then and pay that credit card off with the student loan money, which depending on your credit card interest rate, that student loan money may be lower than holding that balance for 3 years of school. So yeah, so that's kind of a long answer to what may seem like a very short question.
No, that's great. And I actually didn't even know that about being able to go back and saying, hey, I need more. Because that was a mistake I made, is I was nervous to not take everything for fear that I wouldn't be able to get more. But that makes perfect sense. And I love credit cards for the very reason you said. They're great. You have to keep them paid off, but when you need them in a pinch, they're excellent. And if you have good credit, you can get very good, like crash or cash. What do they call it? Cash, kind of like cash advances, but you essentially write yourself a check, for 3% or less for 18 months. And so as long as you're paying the minimums, but like you said, and try to figure out what makes more sense, paying the minimum, can I afford that? Or going back and taking out more student loans?
Right.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. So one last question is that I heard it's a good idea to contribute to a Roth IRA during school, but how am I supposed to do that when I will be living on loans?
It's always fun for me to hear what people have heard. Everybody has their opinion, right? And everybody knows what you should be doing. So most CRNAs, as we've talked about, are not going to have income, or they're going to have extremely low income, right, during school. And so that's going to be important for actually 2 reasons. Number one, are you going to actually have money in your pocket to be able to contribute, right? So we just talked about taking loans to put into an emergency fund. It's kind of the same idea, a little bit. But the other piece that's maybe even more important is the IRS has limitations on how much you can put into a Roth IRA. And so it's going to be the amount of your, as they say, your taxable compensation for the year. So that may not be an issue in year 1, but in year 2, because of having, depending on when your program start is, but in year 2, if you have 0 earned income for the year, you cannot put anything in. If you have $100 of income, you could put $100 in, but you're certainly more than likely not going to be getting up to what is currently the $7,000 mark, which is the high for your I'm sorry, 7,000 if you're over the age of 50, 6,000 if you're under the age of 50.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, good to know. I had no idea about that either. And I, believe it or not, I actually have a Roth from way back in the day when I was actually an undergrad student, and it's actually done. I haven't done much with it, but it's done fairly well. But I know there's also a way, if you do have a Roth, maybe just putting it aside to kind of, they call it like a backdoor Roth, but there's always ways you can mess with that in the future. But yeah, like if you don't have any income, that makes sense. You're not gonna be able to put anything in it. So
that's right. Yeah. And that backdoor Roth thing, or Roth conversion.
Yeah, the conversion.
So, those are things that could be on the table as you move through your years as a student. You almost always want to talk to both a tax professional and also a financial professional to make sure that you understand the ins and outs and the goods and bads of doing that.
Mhm.
The one piece as well here is that there are state tax rules that can differ also.
Mm.
So you do want to make sure that you understand what are those state rules that may differ from the federal rules with regard to the tax treatment of Roth IRAs. And there's sometimes conflicts there when it comes to
Gotcha.
those Roth conversions. So you just want to make sure you understand.
Yeah. Ugh, all that's so complicated. Definitely not. I don't know how you do it.
Well, I was just going to say, Jenny, I know you've heard me say this before. Um, we do this every day,
Yeah.
right? You guys do what you do every day. And I always joke, I know propofol, and that's about it. Like, I'm not going to try to do your job.
At least you didn't say Michael
For
Jackson.
sure.
People are always like, that's not that Michael Jackson drug. I'm like, oh man.
Oh,
I'm like, okay, let's,
but
yeah.
yeah. So that's, that's part of what we're here for, to help people understand all this language and all the ins and outs, because there's a lot of details, a lot of stuff that sometimes you hear the flashy part of it, but you don't understand all the underlying stuff. So
Yes. And I think that's what makes it so confusing and hard to really decipher what's good and what's bad, is because there's so many ifs and everyone's situation is a little bit different and unique. So it's really key to kind of, you can't just take someone else's advice essentially.
Absolutely.
Because it might have worked for them, but it's not going to work for you.
I agree wholeheartedly, Jenny.
So this is amazing. Thank you so much, Natalie. Yeah, I'm excited to do this. And as you guys are aware of CRNA School Prep Academy students, Natalie does quarterly webinars for you guys. And so you're probably familiar with Natalie. She's amazing. And I'm very excited that she has agreed to do these webinars for you guys. Again, CRNA School Prep Academy, you have access to a financial planner, Natalie. But today was a freebie for everyone. And I've been sharing it, screaming it from the mountaintops. I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode today. Natalie, thank you so much for your time.
You are so welcome. Thanks for having me, Jenny.
You're welcome. This won't be the last we see each other. Natalie's actually, just real quick, Natalie's going to be speaking at our fall conference, almost said spring, fall conference 2021 in Greenville, South Carolina. We're super excited about that. Yay. So stay tuned for announcements of CRNA School Prep Academy fall conference. And this is over and out. I hope you guys all have a good day.